Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing Jack Humphrey, who is going to be giving a talk and hosting a roundtable discussion. Jack is a VP of Engineering and just celebrated his 10th Indeed anniversary, as a measure of how long that is or how much Indeed has grown since then. Jack has shared the statistic that there were more people that have started in the last 3 weeks than were employed at the entire company when he started. So we've grown a little bit. So Jack is the engineering lead for the engineering capabilities team, where he manages the teams that help build the infrastructure that we use to build, deploy, and manage the Indeed services. In his spare time, he also enjoys reading sci-fi and making music with his kids. Welcome, Jack.
I'll leave it here. Thanks, Brian, for that introduction. As he said, I'm Jack Humphrey, and I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about my leadership journey and kind of share with you how I've developed as a leader using some guiding principles. And then I'm going to talk to you for about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to invite up some of my colleagues who are engineering directors here at Indeed for a panel discussion that I'm really excited about. When I first gave this talk earlier this year, I gave it to a gathering of technology leaders, and the title of the talk was, I don't read books. So why would I say that? That sounds crazy. It all started with an email that I got last November from a manager that I'd been working with. And he asked a very straightforward question. He said, is there a book on management which you feel influenced you the most? Can you recommend something? And it's a very straightforward question. I immediately thought, well, that deserves an answer. And then I had to think about for a little while, do I want to be honest? Do I want to admit the truth? And the truth is that, not exactly that I don't read books. Books just haven't been the main way that I've built my leadership style, that I've developed as a leader. Yes, I've read the occasional book, and heaven knows I've started more than I've finished. But really what's influenced me more are people. And so I wanted to, I decided to be honest and answer honestly. So I admitted the truth, and I started to reply. And I started it by saying, not really. I've been more influenced by people than books, and I've been more influenced by role models, by mentors, and so on. And so I wrote that sentence, and I thought, well, that's a really unsatisfying answer to send. So I thought, what else can I talk about? And I said, well, really, I've developed by kind of thinking about all the different things I've seen people do, and advice I've read, or advice I've heard, and kind of filtering it through my own kind of intuition and deciding which things I want to put in my leadership toolkit, so to speak. So I said something to that effect, and then I started listing techniques that I'd put in my leadership toolkit. I said, I'm going to give him something here. I'm not going to recommend a book, but I'm going to give him something. So I started listing things that I thought were good practices. And I stopped myself after I'd written about 12 of them, and I thought, well, that's now we're going. This is becoming quite a long email. But they were things like focus on removing roadblocks, ask questions, prefer a question to a statement when you're coaching someone. And these are things that are easy to say and fairly easy to conceptualize, but often kind of pretty hard to put into practice. And so I listed out 12 things along those lines. And then I felt the need to add some disclaimers. So I said, you know, I'm actually also still on this journey. I'm still learning. I have my own blind spots. And then I recommended some books. So after all that, I was like, well, if you really want to read something, you go read about the research that Google has done. They have a site, rework.withgoogle.com, where they've written a lot about their research as part of over the years as part of Project Oxygen, and they've really studied what it takes to make a great manager. So there's a lot of really good content on there. And then I thought about how much I admire the writing of Camille Fournier. Everything she writes, I think, is spot on and really matches kind of how I think about leadership. And so I recommended her book, The Manager's Path, which talks about how to navigate. It's kind of organized in this like, so you're an individual contributor thinking about leadership all the way through to you're a CTO, and kind of it's a very progressive kind of set of really good advice for thinking about that path. So I recommended those two books, and I hit send, and I was feeling like, wow, that was 45 minutes that I wasn't planning to spend, but it got me reflecting on, what is this intuition, and what are these things that how have I decided to put certain things in my leadership toolkit and other things not? And I thought, well, yeah, I think I have these guiding principles, some of which I've been conscious about, some of which have been more unconscious. And I thought, I wonder if anybody would be interested in hearing me talk about this. And I'm still wondering that, but maybe you're here for the free food, maybe you're here for the panel, but maybe a few of you are interested anyway. Over the past 10 years, I've been incredibly fortunate to get the opportunity to be here at Indeed as it's grown, and get the chance to grow as a leader and help other people kind of along their leadership journeys through coaching and mentorship. And that's been an amazing experience for me. Before I go on and kind of share more about how I've approached this, I'm going to offer two disclaimers. And these are not apologies, because I've learned in public speaking training that you should never, ever apologize for what you're about to say. So if you don't like these and think I shouldn't have said them, I'm sorry. Okay. The first one is books are awesome. I say I don't read books, but I love books. I love all kinds of books, including sci-fi, as Brian mentioned in the introduction. I think books are an amazing way to spread ideas, to inspire people to change the world. So let me just check that off. I love books. I'm happy to talk with people afterward about the kind of books I love, but they don't really have to do with the talk. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check my privilege, because I'm talking about my leadership journey here, and it feels really awkward to do that and not acknowledge that I'm a white man, I'm cisgender, I was raised in an environment of abundance, I had the opportunity to go to college, so on and so on. And I don't say any of those things to diminish like what I've managed to do in my career, but more to acknowledge that other people have a set of challenges that I haven't had to overcome, that they face on their journeys. All right, so disclaimers out of the way, what I want to do is share the principles that guide me as a leader and kind of how I got to them, but really the message here is you should define your own. And so I want to talk to you about how you could go through that process of defining your own, or kind of realizing the ones that have been working for you sort of subconsciously. But why do this? Well, I think the main reason to do this is that there are lots of different ways to lead. There's lots of different ways to be a good leader, and there's no one recipe for being a great leader. And so you have to think about how to personalize this journey for yourself. You have to understand that some aspects of leadership are going to come naturally to you and are going to be fairly easy. And some aspects are going to require you to work and are going to be very unnatural for you. And if you've got some principles that correspond to what comes naturally and what's hard, and kind of can guide you through the hard stuff, and you'll be a better leader for it. But before you can like sit down and write, here are my 7 or 8 or 10 guiding principles, you probably need to understand yourself, so you understand what's easy and what's hard. And I'm going to offer you a framework for doing that. To develop your leadership style, to understand yourself, think about your inspirations, your aspirations, your motivations, and your inclinations. And I think this is a really excellent framework because it rhymes. I really like that it rhymes, but I hope it's useful to you. Let's dive into it. So your inspirations are the things that give you the urge to do something, to get out there into the world and do something. What leaders inspire you? What accomplishments do you see in the world that inspire you? As a few examples for myself, When I see people solving difficult problems in novel ways, in other words, people who are innovating, that inspires me. When I see people creating things, really anything, art, products, whatever it is, that kind of elevates us as human beings, that inspires me. And when I think about leaders, I think about the leaders who inspire me are authentic, they're humble, and they're passionate about what they're doing. So those are some examples of my inspirations. Once you've thought about your inspirations, you can think about your aspirations. What do you hope to achieve in life? What do you want to do in this journey that you're on? How do you want to lead, if that's your aspiration? And as some examples from myself, I have these general aspirations of wanting to help others achieve their goals and to do work that matters. And I think that doing work that matters in the world is a big part of the reason why I really connect with Indeed's mission to help people get jobs, and why I've been so excited to be part of that for the last decade. Once you've thought about your inspirations and aspirations, then you really got to get into it. You got to think about what are your motivations. So I define motivations as the activities that give you energy. What energizes you? What parts of your job, what parts of the job you want are just make you wake up excited and like, I can't wait to do that today. I can't wait to start on that thing that I need to do today. And as a leader, it's like, what parts of leadership do you love? What parts of leadership really give you that energy? Because let's be honest, like no matter what your job is, there's going to be parts of it that you don't love, that don't energize you, that don't motivate you. That's just the reality. Some parts that maybe you actually even actively dread, that kind of sap your energy. But the key is to getting a good balance, right? Like you want to get the things that motivate you kind of outweighing on the scales the things that take away your energy. Otherwise, you're not going to be happy and fulfilled in your work. I'll share some of my motivations. I'm really motivated, I'm really energized by working together with a team or a set of people to accomplish a shared goal, really getting in there and feeling that sense of shared achievement. I'm also really motivated by seeing others that I've helped grow in their careers or have success. That gives me a ton of energy. And one of the ones that's been harder for me to admit about myself, but is absolutely true, is that I'm motivated by receiving recognition. And that's an important thing for me to know about myself. And it's also the reason I can say that all of you paying attention to me right now is giving me a ton of energy. So thank you. So once you've thought about inspirations, aspirations, motivations, then you're going to really get into it and think about what are your inclinations? What are your natural tendencies? What's your default? When you're leading, what comes naturally to you? And these are things that may help you achieve your aspirations or may hinder you, may hold you back. And you've got to think about those in equal measure. I'll give you some examples, and I'm going to get even more personal now. The first one is an inclination I have to solve problems. I really love to get into it with people and say, okay, what's the problem here? Do we understand it? Let's dig into it. How could we solve it? Let's get to a solution. Let's work together and solve this thing. And this was really great for me early in my career. Super, super helpful. Like definitely, like people appreciated this when I did this early in my career. As I've kind of grown through different leadership roles, I've had to learn to sometimes balance this, sometimes hold back on this inclination, because if I get into it and try to solve the problem, I might be actually taking away the autonomy of someone in my team who really should be the one to own defining the problem, defining the solution. And I don't, and so I have to be careful that when I'm doing this, that I'm not disempowering somebody. So it's a balancing act. That thing that helped me a lot early on might hinder me now. Another inclination that I have is that I'm really interested kind of one-on-one learning about people and kind of what makes them tick, what inspires them, what are they trying to do, what motivates them. This has been super helpful to me in coaching people one-on-one. Like I don't have to work at it. I just find myself really interested in getting into it and understanding people. On the flip side, I'm actually, and this is another thing super hard to admit about myself, but I'm like a pretty closed off person. I don't necessarily, even though I'm very interested in people, I don't necessarily open up very often. And one of the ways this shows up for me is that over my life, I've been terrible at asking for help. Terrible, terrible, terrible at asking for other people to help me. And that shows up in a lot of different ways as I've become a leader, which like I was terrible at delegating for a long time, because delegating is just another way of asking for help. And it's been challenging for me to see when other people need help and kind of proactively engage to do that. So this has been an inclination that I have to be like super conscious of and working against as a leader. The final one that I'll share as an inclination is in quotes, because it's something my father said to me probably 1,000 times growing up at least, which is hope for the best and expect the worst. And he really, really wanted me to be able to be optimistic and look out to like something good happening, but he never wanted me to be surprised when the worst possible thing happened. It was really important like for him to impart that to me, and so it's kind of burned into my psyche. And it's come in handy. It's useful sometimes, but that expecting the worst and kind of constantly looking at all the angles, like if I verbalize that too much, if I overshare as a leader, that can be troubling to people. People don't necessarily want to hear all the ways that what we're doing together could go wrong. As a leader, people want to look to me for inspiration, not pessimism. So that's something that I have to also be conscious of. So that's the framework and kind of an example of how I might think through some parts of it. You think about your inspirations, your aspirations, your motivations and inclinations, and then you kind of start to think about how that might inform what's going to guide you as a leader. And I'll give you one note of caution, though, is that this process of kind of understanding yourself, trying to do it alone might not be a good idea. You might not want to go solo on this. There's a really good, I pulled this really good quote from a piece that Camille Fournier wrote last year. She talks about this kind of like understanding, this process of understanding yourself, and says you then need someone to help you dig into which of the things you believe about yourself are really true and which are just stories you're telling yourself. So this distinction is really important. The distinction between what you believe is true about yourself and what is actually true about yourself. And sometimes having another person can really help you get to the bottom of that. And that can be a person, that can be a trusted friend, that can be a family member, that can be a coach, that can be a mentor, that can be a therapist. It could be your manager, but that might not be the best idea. Sometimes this can get kind of messy and extremely personal. And depending on your relationship with your manager, that might not be the best call. Camille goes on in this article to say, definitely don't have it be your manager. And I think that's kind of good general advice. So don't go it solo. But once you've gone through this process of understanding yourself, you can make a list like I have of these are my guiding principles as a leader. My guiding principles are caring, curiosity, humility, creativity, trust, and optimism. And then, so what do I do with those? Great, I've got words written down on a slide. So I try to use these to guide me. And one of the ways I use them to guide me is I think about how they can be used to kind of process new ideas or new things that I might put in my leadership toolkit. Like I hear about some new management practice or some new thing that great leaders do. And I think about it in terms of, does this resonate with me and why? Like how does it match up to my principles? And I'll give you a few examples. The first example is a book that came out in 2016. I know, here I am. I'm recommending another book. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stanier. And in this book, Stanier summarizes his own book early on as a haiku. He says, if this were a haiku rather than a book, it would read, "Tell less and ask more. Your advice is not as good as you think it is." and I love this because it's a haiku, which is great, but I also really like this thought process, and this really resonated with me. So why, and so, check out this book, but why did this resonate with me? And it resonated with me because when you're coaching someone and you're asking questions, you're showing curiosity about them. You're also showing humility by asking a question rather than offering a viewpoint or an opinion or offering direction. You're showing that maybe you don't have all the answers. You don't know the best way forward. You're showing trust because you're showing that you trust the person to come up with the answers and find their way through this guided conversation. And you're showing optimism that this guided two-way conversation is going to produce a better result than if you just came in and said, here's what you should do. So I think this is great advice, at least through my lens, but you can think about it through your own lens and see how it works for you. The next example I have is not a book, but a person. And it's a person who inspired me earlier in my career. So I'm going to tell you a story from about 12 or 13 years ago. I don't remember exactly when it was. I was working for Google. I was an engineering manager, and I had a few teams that I was responsible for. And I had my first project review with this gentleman, Jeff Huber. He probably looked a little bit younger then, but he was the director, the senior director. I don't remember what his title was, responsible for the entire area that I was working in, and I had never had I'd never had any interaction with Jeff up until this point. I'd never met him in person, so I was pretty nervous, like going into this project review. But I was prepared. I had my slides. I was ready to go. I knew my stuff. So I started presenting, and right away Jeff jumps in and starts asking me questions about my projects. And almost right away, it becomes completely clear that he already knows everything that I put in my slides. Like, he already knows everything about my projects. And that was really interesting. And he's asking these questions. Not only does he showing me that he knows everything about my projects, but he's asking me questions that are really thought-provoking and really interesting and getting me thinking and kind of on my feet. I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking about ways that I can change some of the direction of my projects and ideas that I'm going to take back to the teams. And I remember I walked out of this review and I thought, I remember really strongly that I thought, that's the kind of leader I want to be. And that's you get those moments of kind of inspiration only every so often in your career, but that one really stuck with me. So this resonates with me because so first of all, he's asking questions. So again, back to the Stanier book, he's showing curiosity about my projects. He's showing humility, that he doesn't believe that he has all the answers by asking me these questions and kind of challenging me to think about the work of my teams. He's showing me trust, right? Like a huge amount of trust I'm realizing is there. Huge amount of trust in that he already knew all these things about what my teams were doing, and this was my first conversation with him about it. We really had a lot of autonomy to do the right things for the company, and that was a really good feeling. The last example I'll share is from a blog post I read about 5 years ago from Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn. And in this post, Jeff talks about how a colleague once gave him some really important advice, which was that in order to effectively communicate to an audience, you need to repeat yourself so often that you grow sick of hearing yourself say it, and only then will people begin to internalize the message. And I thought, that's an interesting formula, but it didn't really resonate with my experience at the time, but I thought, interesting, and kind of filed it away. A few years later, here I was starting to see, in the last couple of years, I was starting to see how this shows up, which is that there's this large engineering organization, and I think we've communicated things to them about what we value, what our culture is, why we're doing what we're doing. And occasionally I see signs that, oh, nope, it's not fully understood by everybody. Somebody has misinterpreted something, or somebody just really didn't get the message that we were trying to communicate. And so this advice from this blog post came rushing back to me, and I went to go find it all excited and read it again, and thought, yes, like, if I want to influence the culture, if I want to make something happen, if I want to explain a strategic direction, I need to repeat it over and over and over until I'm sick of saying it, and then I need to repeat it a lot more until it gets out there and well understood. And I probably need to do it in a lot of different ways. And so how does this resonate with my guiding principles? Well, first of all, with caring, like, if I care about the people I'm trying to reach, then I'm motivated to do everything I can do to connect with them and help them understand what we're trying to communicate. Humility, if it's a good reminder about humility, no matter what my title or position is, being reminded that not everybody is hanging on my every word, not everybody is tightly tuned into what I'm saying. So I've got to repeat it in as many different places, in as many different ways as I can. And creativity comes into play here, I'll tell you, because you've got to be creative about how you get the message out, but then you've also just got to be creative about all the different ways you're going to repeat it so that you don't start to sound like a robot. All right, so that's it. Those are the examples I wanted to share. And what I want you to take away from what I've shared with you so far today is that I think it's worthwhile to go through this process of understanding yourself as a leader and identifying what principles you want to have guide you, and then use those guiding principles as you grow and kind of go on your leadership journey, and use them to kind of filter the world. Use them to think about the behaviors you see, the things you hear about that you should be doing, and then embrace the things that work for you as a leader. Thanks.